Hi there, folks. Welcome to Ag AM in Kansas. I'm Dr. Dan Thomson from Kansas State University, and this morning we have a special opportunity to spend some time at the Kansas Farm Bureau with some special guests. And first up, and our first guest is Mr. Jim Sipes. And Jim, you're from Mantor, Kansas.
Yes, sir.
And you're the 9th District Representative Officer for the Kansas Farm Bureau.
Yes, sir.
And the other important issue that we're really going to get into this morning is the Lesser Prairie Chicken.
Yes.
And you've been taking the lead on that for the Kansas Farm Bureau, and it's a very, very important issue for agriculture in the state of Kansas.
Yes, sir. It certainly is. We know that if we're going to recover the species with over 90% of the Lesser Prairie Chicken habitat area on private lands, private landowners will have to be involved in some way.
You bet.
The question is whether it will be a voluntary involvement or whether it will be involuntary. With the listing, recent listing as threatened, it looks like our participation is going to be voluntary or mostly voluntary. But we are concerned that there may be some areas that would be considered prime habitat where we may not have voluntary involvement. It may be involuntary involvement, and that's a huge concern for agriculture.
You bet.
We're also very much concerned because the prairie chickens apparently don't like anything man-made, and so that will affect any development that goes on in western Kansas. And there's 36 Kansas counties that are involved, and we're really concerned about what will happen with energy development in those 36 counties. We rely very heavily on the oil and gas development to provide tax base for those counties.
Right.
And if we can't do development, it really affects those counties. So it's a huge issue.
So how much of the issue is related to the drought situation?
We believe that the species is threatened because of the drought. There's really little other things to think that it's caused this other than the drought. So we believe the species will recover very quickly when the drought is ended.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to force it to rain.
That's correct.
As we learn.
Yes.
And so when we talk about the voluntary and involuntary program, I'm reading between the lines is that we have some producers that are ready to jump in and do what they can.
Yes.
And now it's how do we reach those producers that maybe are needing a little nudge to help the voluntary program kickstart so that we don't wind up with some kind of government mandate.
That's correct. Right now, there are a couple of different programs out there that people can participate in, which provide them protection from any further action in case the species becomes listed as endangered, but also provide some payment to farmers and ranchers for providing habitat. So there's opportunities available to farmers and ranchers if they want to participate in a voluntary program that will pay them pretty well for their participation in the programs.
So what kind of things are farmers and ranchers being asked to do in the voluntary program?
Basically, these are going to be grazing lands, and they'll have to manage their grazing. The
Okay.
prairie chickens like a certain height of grass, and so eventually they'll have to leave a certain amount of grass at the end of the season so that it can recover to a certain height. So there will be managed grazing that will be a huge part of this program, and that's pretty much what we expect. There's probably going to be some limitations on ability to go into the pastures during lek season, which is basically April 15th through July 15th. So we expect to see some limitations during that period of time. But we actually haven't seen a management plan yet, so it'll be interesting to see what all requirements those will be. And it will vary by area. If you're in a shortgrass prairie, obviously you'll have different management
Right.
needs than if you're in a tall grass prairie.
And so really managing that stocking rate and stocking density and the
Yes.
amount of time and that the cattle are out there is going to be important.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's been a great topic. I appreciate your time. Appreciate all you're doing on behalf of not only the Kansas Farm Bureau, but all of Kansas agriculture. You got a big job.
Well, thank you. Enjoy doing it.
Thanks. And thanks for being here. Thanks for being here on Ag AM. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break. Hi there, welcome to Ag AM in Kansas, and once again we're with Mr. Jim Sipes from Mantor, Kansas and the Kansas Farm Bureau, and we've been discussing the Lesser Prairie Chicken issues. And one of the things that as we left the discussion, one of the things that we were discussing during the break was, there's a difference between just habitat and critical habitat.
Yes, sir. And that's a huge concern. We expect that in March of 2015, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will declare critical habitat for the species. And they set the rules for the critical habitat without any involvement of anybody else. And I'm very concerned that folks that have prime habitat will be affected by the critical habitat determination and the rules that we've not had any inclusion in developing. So farmers and ranchers that find themselves in that situation need to do something to protect themselves against further actions in case the species becomes endangered. So they can participate in some of these plans that are available out there. One of them is called the range-wide plan. The one that Farm Bureau has been supporting and helping to develop is called the Stakeholder Conservation Strategy for the Lesser Prairie Chicken. There's a few other NRCS programs. But if you participate in one of those programs, you will have some protection against any further action if it becomes endangered. You have to agree to do some management for the Lesser Prairie Chicken, but it would be a huge benefit to those folks before critical habitat determination rules come out if they have decided to do something to protect themselves.
Well, and I think it's important now. Can they contact of course the Farm Bureau members are contacting Kansas Farm Bureau and working with them through these
Yes.
programs. Is that a good resource to get a hold of, somebody here at Kansas Farm Bureau if you're needing assistance or wanting to know more about it?
Yes, in fact, we've been working on a few different options trying to help landowners decide what to do. And one of the issues is not all the plans are fully developed at this point.
Okay.
So it's hard to make a decision when you haven't got all the plans developed. So we're working on a plan with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to provide protection to our landowners and members of Kansas Farm Bureau until they can make a decision when the plans are developed. So we've sent a letter of intent to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They've yet to respond to that yet, but we think that, according to the lawyers, that our farmers and ranchers can have protection if they just agree that they're trying to decide what they're wanting to do.
So at the end of the day, what would be your bullet point list if you're wanting to talk, you're trying to reach a producer that hasn't been involved in this? What do I say when I go out and I shake hands across the fence with them?
They just need to be watching and learning about what's going on and trying to figure out what it works best for them. They're calling all of this a voluntary program, but if it becomes an endangered species, it all of a sudden becomes a lot less voluntary. And we need to protect the species and do what we can to get the species off the list as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, we've had about 1,500 species go on the list over the years, but only 56 have come off. So the Endangered Species Act has been very, very poor in doing its job. So it's a huge concern, and I would be surprised if we may not see an endangered listing soon.
Kind of like a lot of things. Easy to get on the list, hard to get your name off.
Right.
Thanks for being with us this morning. Thank you for watching Ag AM in Kansas. More after the break.